Yep. Yeah. What is emotional intelligence? We can see that.
Oh, okay, there we go. All right, great. So I don't want to lose you. So there we go. Okay, so emotional intelligence, I really like to get some clarity with people because uh, most people can confuse emotional intelligence or EQ with IQ.
Right. Right.
So just to differentiate between the two, emotional intelligence is a set of, I have it here on the slide, right?
Mhm.
Emotional and social skills that collectively establish how well we do four things: perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain relationships, cope with challenges, and use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way.
Mhm.
And I'm going to repeat that last point again. Use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. Awareness, right? The first step to any change, we know, is awareness. So emotional intelligence and the work that we do in that area, especially within the coaching industry and coaching leaders, is that first step is just clarity on that awareness on how we are showing up, right? Emotionally, as well as intellectually. How
Well, Joe, I would say that, up until recently, the pandemic has helped is that, this was groundbreaking because people didn't think emotions had a place in the workplace.
now,
So I say you take it back and really get people to really understand this idea that you're not emotional, leave your emotions at home, come
yeah,
to the office, do your job, go home.
more.
And that's why this was groundbreaking, because it was really getting people to say, wait, emotions have a place. And we all know emotions are always in the workplace.
Yeah,
It's been an important part of it. But I think it's important to go down to that basics, because there are a
yeah.
lot of people to say, oh, everybody knows their emotions. No, they don't. And they don't know how to utilize internal and external emotions.
Yeah, Dale, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, we dared not say the word emotion
Right,
in corporate education setting. We wanted to say energy,
right,
right?
right.
Now, everybody is much more comfortable with emotional intelligence, or EQ, as we call it. And the way that that differs from IQ is that IQ is actually a measure of an individual's intellectual, analytical, logical, and rational abilities, right? So it gauges how we learn new things, how we focus on tasks, how we recall information, right? Very, very different than EQ, or emotional intelligence. They say that IQ will get you in the door, but EQ will keep you there,
Right. Right.
right? So what we see, and I'm gonna show you a model real quick so that we can sort of discuss all the components and share this like with our community here at FDU. And let me actually do that now. What we're seeing in organizations with leaders is a lot of leaders will rise through the ranks based on their IQ or their technical ability,
Right.
right? They're brilliant. I love to use love to use the example of a brilliant thoracic surgeon.
Mhm.
Um, I actually have worked with a few surgeons, a few physicians at leading hospitals. What happens is they are brilliant in their field. They are brilliant in their technical skills. For 20 years, they were at the top of their game as surgeons. And now they are the chief of their department and they have to manage people. But their people, for the first 25 years of their career, were unconscious and under anesthesia. So they
Mhm.
never had to talk to them.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
We all know those physicians with the terrible bedside manner, but we go to them for their expertise.
Mhm.
When that brilliant person, maybe a wonderful person, gets into the role where he has to tap into his emotional intelligence to work with people, he is at a significant deficit there. The great news is that while IQ remains constant throughout your lifetime, it does decline a little after 70. EQ can only be enhanced. right? So it's a skill that can be improved.
And Joe, one of the things that I think to highlight, and I know some people on the line, are coaches, is that probably the number one, certainly coaching opportunity that I have, I think most coaches have, is somebody that was technically a superstar. They
Yeah.
get promoted and they're managing people now, and they try to manage them the way that they were promoted. And so so it really is transferring that IQ to an EQ. That is such, it's amazing how many companies need that kind of coaching for someone who's gone from an IQ success to becoming an EQ leader.
And the challenge is, Dale, is that the IQ leader, the high IQ leader, doesn't know it,
Right,
just because they're not aware.
right,
And
right.
that's where really skilled, not to jump on my ICF soapbox, right? But coaches that work in organizations, the ones that hold an international coaching certification credential, they are trained to work in these areas. They are trained in the foundation principles, the core competencies, and the code of ethics, right? Which is why that is built. That is what our program is built on. And our program at FGU is actually accredited. We are a level 2 accredited program from the International Coaching Federation. So coaches that have been trained under that methodology, whether at our program or a program that's similar, they have the skill set to work with this. They have the skill set to earn the respect of the executive, right? The person wants to be coached, because we know that you have to be a willing participant and want to develop and grow. So, yes, we've gotten into the weeds with lots of leaders like that, but they always come out on the other side playing a bigger game in their organization and making a bigger impact. So that's what we want. We want that result. And
Right.
working with EQ and leadership can really get you there.
Right.
So I threw up this model. Can you see these areas?
Yeah, the EQ-I 2.0 model. Yes.
So I'm going to go through this just really quickly, and then you and I
Right.
can pull and have a discussion on it. So the EQ, emotional intelligence model and assessment that I use is an MHS assessment. So the slides that you're going to see are proprietary to them, and I pulled their information, and that is noted on all the screens. What differs, most EQ models have 4 quadrants or 4 components. What I love about the EQI 2.0 model is that it has 5 components. And those 5 components you can see as self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, decision-making, and stress management. As we go around, I think you can see my pointer, as we go around the circle, all right, all pulling towards the middle of emotional intelligence. This assessment not only has 5 components, it has 16 subcategories, which really gives you areas to work with leaders, individuals, teams, high potentials, and we can touch on them briefly and discuss them. And if there are any questions, we can take it from there. So this assessment also gives a an overall happiness score, which is very interesting. So
let's for those that may be new to this. So let's just do the high level. So self-perception. What's self-perception?
Self-perception is exactly what it says that it is, right? It's how we are perceiving ourselves internally, right? So self-perception is made up of 3 areas, right? Self-regard, self-actualization, and self-awareness.
Right.
So self-regard, how we perceive and understand ourselves. Self-actualization, how we achieve and see personal goals and actualize them. And emotional self-awareness, understanding one's emotions. So those are all the subcomponents under self-perception. Self-expression is the next one, big picture, openly expressing one's feelings verbally and non-verbally. Okay, that shows up as expression, assertiveness, and interdependence. Interpersonal relationships, right? Empathy, we look at empathy, social responsibility.
Right.
Actually, what I can do, let me have you see this in a little bit of a different way. Let's look at it this way.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's clear.
All right, so we have the 5 areas. This just so you know, this is the model, the way the model is actually shared, but this is just another way to view the model.
Right.
Self-perception is made up, as I said, of self-regard, self-actualization, emotional awareness. And you can go through and see the others: self-expression, interpersonal, decision-making, and stress management. So when we look at emotional intelligence, we are looking at the subcomponents in each one of these areas and how we are showing up as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, someone may have very, very high self-regard. And if self-regard is overdone, right? Self-regard can show up as, say, confidence, right?
Right.
Sometimes that may need to be dialed up, or I'm sorry, that may need to be dialed back, because maybe they're showing up in their self-perception as too confident, or in their self-expression. I'll show you an example of, this is probably an easier way to look at it. You don't really, I just want you to look at the colored lines.
Mm-hmm.
100 right down the middle is just about average. All right, so see my cursor. Actually, I probably, let's see, I'll do an arrow. This might be better. Okay. Down the middle is average. To the left is below average. To the right is above average. Now, I will tell you, as a coach, when I use this, I don't use the words above average or below average. I use to the right or to the left. So
Right.
let's think of emotional intelligence as a muscle, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're building up that muscle and we're strengthening that muscle, we're moving that bar over to the right.
Right. Right.
If our muscle is weak, okay, so if we look at the self-expression here, and it's so small, but I can tell you that
it's hard to see.
this sample, self-expression, it's independence, okay? That's a little bit to the left of average, right?
Right. Right.
That may be something that we may want to work on. I'm not sure if I just lost you, Dale.
Yeah, I'm here.
I still have you? Okay.
You still have me. Can you go back to the other? I like the other one, but it's hard to see this one. But the one you just had before, yeah. No. The second one, yeah, that one. This one, it's clear. Everybody can see that. But I think there's some important things about this.
Yeah.
So often that, I know people that are wonderful people, but they really have no self-awareness, no emotional self-awareness.
Right.
And, and we all have to, and there from time to time, we all fall into that. And so I think one of the exercises that I hope people take away is really beginning to think about their emotional self-awareness.
Yes.
Right. Because, we talk about the levels of listening, and we joke that the lowest level of listening is that self-focused listener.
Yes.
Who can't wait till someone shuts up so they can start telling their story, and they're not listening.
Yeah.
Again, and they're just obviously emotionally not self-aware.
Yes. But we also see, like, let's take a look, for example, at the stress management piece, right?
Mhm.
And knowing where you are in stress management, the three components of stress management: flexibility, stress tolerance, and optimism. Okay. So as a leader, are you able to adapt and adjust? Are you flexible? Are you able to adapt and adjust to your feelings or a peer's feelings or thinking in a new situation?
Mhm.
Right? What's your stress tolerance? Can you effectively manage your emotions in that situation? And what's your optimism? You're able to be positive and look on the brighter side. So if we think of all of these areas as muscles, what do we want to strengthen? What do we want to build? Or thinking of it as a volume on the radio, what do we want to dial up, make louder? Or what do we want to dial down and make quieter?
Quieter, right. Right.
So a leader whose stress tolerance is low is not going to be managing his emotions or her emotions.
Mhm.
Maybe he's, blowing up during meetings. Maybe he's impatient, right?
Absolutely. And again, I go, kind of going through it in this order, this self-expression. All right. So if you're not emotionally self-aware, your self-expression is probably inappropriate.
Correct.
And so you
Ex-
make a lot of mistakes.
Yes, yes. And then the other thing there as well, when you're looking at, with self-awareness, right, and how that's showing up, it's really showing up a little bit in all of these areas, Dale. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to be aware in your decision making, aware in your stress management, aware in your self-perception. How are you showing up?
Right.
How are you communicating your feelings and your beliefs?
Right.
Right. What about your resilience
Mhm.
in your self-expression?
Right.
Do
Right.
we need to, and the great thing about emotional intelligence, when we do these debriefs and we work with leaders, we really look at how all of these components dance with each other.
Mhm.
So, for example, someone may be really to the right in assertiveness, okay, but to the left in flexibility
Right.
under stress management. So can you see how just being aware of that as a leader to dial one up and one down would make a difference?
Absolutely. And just sticking on that, a lot of people don't understand how their lack of emotional intelligence is holding them back. A lot of folks are just emotionally unintelligent. They've still fairly successful, but they don't understand what opportunities. They rub people the wrong way. They insert themselves when they shouldn't insert themselves. And so it's important to do a check, because that will impact either in an obvious way or a subtle way their success
Yeah.
or the respect that people have for them. So it's really important to do that. And so, so that self-expression, and then the interpersonal relationships, and that's at the heart of this. That's what this is all about.
Yes.
Um,
If you, I mean, the studies are going to show that if you respect and like your team, your boss, you're going to be motivated, intrinsically motivated, right, to perform.
mhm.
We know that. There is a book by Thomas Stanley. It's called The Millionaire Mind, and I thought this was interesting. There was a survey that was taken by 733 multimillionaires, and this was just in the US.
Mm.
And they were asked to rate the factors, the top 30 factors that were most responsible for their success.
Oh, interesting.
I'm going to give them to you.
Yeah. Get a pen, everyone. Get a pen
Exactly.
or type it on your computer.
Exactly. Do we have Susan on the line?
Yeah, Sue's there.
So Sue, you may
Yeah.
want to put these in the chat as I say them for everyone. Or I don't, do we have everybody in the chat or Q&A?
We should, yeah.
Okay, you know what? I host and panelists. If anyone wants to just sort of jump into the chat and write them down, I'll give them to you. These were the top 5 out of 30 factors. 1, being honest with all people.
Honestly. Well,
2, being well disciplined. 3, getting along with people. 4, having a supportive spouse.
mm,
And 5, working harder than most people.
mm.
Those were the top 5. IQ was number 21 out of 30.
Wow.
So it just wasn't important, relatively speaking. The studies in the workplace show that EQ can be up to almost 45 to 50% of workplace job success. So just
Wow.
really interesting at what they were looking at there.
So I don't know if Sue got all the read it. So we got be honest with all people, be well disciplined.
Being well disciplined,
What's the next one?
getting along with people,
Getting along with people,
having a supportive spouse,
supportive spouse.
and I would say or significant other, right?
Right.
Work harder than most people. And that was from The Millionaire Minds, right? Best-selling author Thomas Stanley. The survey was of 733 US millionaires.
Wow. Wow.
No, so just looking at what really got them to where they were, right? Or where they wanted to be.
Well, but this emotional intelligence is a secret to entrepreneurial success too. Because
Absolutely.
I know so many entrepreneurs that think I'm just going to work. I'm going to outwork everybody else, and I'm going to be a billionaire because I outworked anybody else, and they forget about all those others. That
Yeah.
work harder is number 5, but people think it's number 1.
I mean, so think about if you're in a room with a few people and that toxic negative person comes in, can't you almost energetically feel that
Mm-hmm.
as they get closer and closer to you?
Yeah.
That's where they're resonating. Are you attracted to that? I mean, maybe that's the wrong, I guess I'm using kind of energy words there, but we don't want to resonate. We're not attracted to, we don't move towards necessarily toxic people, right? Unless we're a toxic person as well, and then you two can go in the corner, but that emotional intelligence is very low. And what we are seeing in organizations today, and Dale, you and I both work in this area, is the new model of leadership is this leader as coach model.
Yep.
The old hierarchical fear-based model is gone. And in order to be modern and current, we need to start looking at emotional intelligence.
Well, but there's a reason too that it's even more important. Emotional intelligence, I think, is even more important now than it was 10 years ago, because innovation is the foundation of every company. And
Yeah.
that if you're in a room and folks are they're positive, they're creative, and negative Nelly walks in, that stifles creativity.
Yes.
And that's your fuel. That's the fuel of success as a business person, as an entrepreneur, as a professor, as anything, is that innovation. But the negativity, the person that turns people off really stifles that. And it goes down to the bottom line. It impacts the success and profitability of your enterprise.
Absolutely. And what I can tell you is, if you work on this, if you are aware, you get some clarity, and you work on your EQ, over a period of 3 to 4 months, you are permanently changing your behaviors, and you are rewiring the neuroplasticity in your brain. You are creating new neural pathways and allowing, not to get into the science, but let's call it the rational brain to speak to the emotional brain, the rational brain, that the front neocortex, right, to the limbic area of the brain, which is the amygdala, right? And that's where we're making that shift, and we're growing, and we are seeing that and getting real results with this.
I wanted to go, stick on the interpersonal. One of the real, I would say that the major problem in the world, which really results in, financial chaos and other things, is the lack of empathy throughout the world. Empathy, and in fact, the intelligent influence is all about a process by which you help people develop empathy. And you can't empathize with others if you don't understand yourself. If you don't understand your own influences, your emotional self-awareness, it's very hard to have empathy. And that's where so many people are, that they are just clueless when it comes to that.
Absolutely. And that interplay. And that's because, Dale, they walk around literally unconscious, right? We are so focused on self. Think about when you're, even when you're, well, as a coach, I mean, this, right? We speak at about, we think twice as much more than we talk. So when we're speaking, our mind is thinking at 1,000 thoughts, right? For every 200, I think it's every 250 to 500 words, we have 1,000 thoughts. So we're not really present. And that's where we can, in this interpersonal area, we can begin to lack. So think about that definition of empathy: to be aware and to understand how others feel, and to be present to that. And if you look at that play of empathy then with interpersonal relationships, right? I mean, if you have strong empathy, it's relatively easy to establish mutually satisfying relationships, right? And play well with others.
And people have, even with empathy, one of the things I've learned, and I do some training, and when I coach, is the idea that, the old saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto yourself.
Yep.
And the challenge with that is that, I've actually adapted that to say, do unto others as they would have you do to them. And so I use, the influence model, music. Music is an influence. Everybody, between ages 14 and 25, we develop our musical foundations. Doesn't mean we don't like other stuff. And so if I want to do unto others the way that I want them to do unto me, I would play my favorite music, even though it may not resonate with them. And so real empathy is playing their music, knowing them, understanding where they're coming from. Those are the extraordinary, and Jo and I are working on this coach leadership model. Those are the coach leaders, because they're able to inspire people in a unique way that makes them all that they can be. And that so often we think, okay, well, I'm the boss, so I like Kool and the Gang, I like Earth, Wind and Fire, so I'm going to play Earth, Wind and Fire, and you better like it, or you're out of here.
Yeah.
Instead of playing Twisted Sister or Metallica or or classical music, you've got to understand the people you're working with, and it's lazy leaders are the ones who just know themselves and don't take the time to know. And actually lazy teachers too. I'm president of 3 school boards. So in a classroom, the best teachers are the ones that know the unique needs of every student in their class. And I can talk to any teacher, and I can get a sense of whether they're good or bad based on their empathy for their student.
And so, Dale, I love that you do sum up the foundation of so much of your work is based on this. So can you sort of share, because I'd love for the listeners to see the interplay. So when you're working with a leader in the area of empathy, they may or may not be aware that that's what you're working on, but that's a muscle that needs to be strengthened. Right. Okay. Let's think about, like, how does empathy, just so everyone can relate to this, how does empathy show up in problem solving?
And that's, so let me go to kind of your first question. So one of the things that I've learned is that you've got to empathize with yourself. Believe it or not, most people don't empathize with themselves. They don't understand themselves. And so that's part of what the influence model is. I get people crying and other things. They've never really thought of themselves, outside of their, this thing called the iceberg introduction. The iceberg, most of the iceberg is below the waterline. And everybody looks at what's above the waterline, where you went to school, what's your title, what do you look like, all that stuff. But who you are is below. And if you don't get to who you are, it's very hard for you to have empathy for other people. So we make sure that people know themselves so they can begin to do that. And when you get to your second question, when you get to understand the empathy of others, the problem solving becomes easy because you're able to be in the role of, for example, say you are a retail business, right? You're selling, you're Gucci, you're selling expensive clothes. There you go. The IQ, EQ. There you go. Oh, that's perfect. Oh, I love it. I love it.
Dale, this is how you and I roll.
Unplanned. That was unplanned.
That was
So once you develop this empathy, when you're going to the customer base, you understand what the customers are looking for. And historically, a lot of marketing people said, well, they don't know what they want. I'm going to teach them what they want. Well, that doesn't work anymore. You've got to understand the unique needs of a very diverse customer base, and the unique needs and wants are very different. So the marketer, the leader with empathy can really understand how to sell and how to solve problems, business problems.
And I will tell you that if you even take it, and I know that you know this, but just for the listeners, lots of times when we look at empathy and we look at self, we have to go back to actually our own self-regard,
right?
Our emotional self-awareness,
mm-hmm.
right? And how we're showing up in self-actualization. Because this will pull into the emotional expression.
Absolutely.
Emotional expression goes back to empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then let's look at then how these three moving forward affect decision-making and stress management.
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely right. And quite honestly, 10 years ago, no one really wanted to look at this.
Mm-hmm. It's soft. It's soft. They say this is soft stuff. I want the hard stuff, but this is actually the hard stuff. This is the stuff today, the soft stuff is the technology. The technology, an app, how hard is it to use an app? That's pretty soft. But it's really hard to interact with people effectively.
Yes. So, so some of the work that you can do with this, if this is something that that you're interested in bringing to your organization or working with yourself, just knowing that, again, there are several different EQ models. Most have 4 components. This one has 5. But what's really interesting about the MHS model specifically is because it is a scientific model, but you can do this as a 360, meaning, an individual. Dale, do you want to expand on what a 360 is?
Yeah. And so for those that may not have used it, is that a 360, because it's 360, it's a circle. And so you are in the middle. Say this is a 360 diagram. You as the leader are in the middle. And so what will happen is you'll be evaluated by the people that report to you, by your coworkers, by your bosses, and that's 360. So all around, and it becomes very interesting to see how you're viewed from different areas. One of the biggest problems in business, and I often ask people, how many of you know somebody that is amazing at managing up and abusive at managing down? That the people below them are leaving in droves because they're abusive, but the boss says, Joe Smith is really, really great. And so, but the 360 identifies when they start to see that all these high potential people that they're working for say, this guy is a maniac. You know, he's abusive, he yells, he screams, but the boss says, I love him because he gets everything, you know, that I want. So that 360-degree feedback is so important.
Slide, Dale.
Yep, that's perfect. You've got the right slides.
Well, I just read that off Google. That's from assessteam.com. But just for our,
Yeah.
just to kind of give everyone a visual. Yeah, it's 360 because the leader is asking everyone around them that they interact to give him feedback for the purposes of him looking at, well, how do I think I'm showing up versus how does everyone else think I'm showing up, right?
And Joe, on a personal level, you know, people can take this and be very, very personal. You know, I always talk about the late Mayor Ed Koch. You know, he used to go around asking people, how am I doing in New York? And, you know, in New York City, they'll tell you. They will tell you whether you want to hear it or not. And but as leaders, we need to do that. We need to go, you know, we need to ask people. We need to ask our customers, you know, how can we do it better? What can I do? How can I meet your needs more importantly? Especially as, you know, if you're a professor, you know, asking the students, you know, yeah, there's a formal evaluation, but really asking, what can we do to make this class more meaningful to you? And so we as human beings, we often get scared of feedback. But the reality is when you ask somebody voluntarily for feedback, that's actually giving them respect. I respect your opinion. I respect your perspective. I want to know, how can I do it? How can I do it better?
Yeah. And just to tag on to why I like this 360 model the best is that not 360, this EQ model. Mm-hmm. You can also do an EQ teams assessment, not just a 360, which is really great because for team building, for team interaction, for conflict management, think about that. So each individual person on the team gets a score, and then collectively as a team, they get a score.
Oh, wow. Wow.
There's so much work that can be done with emotional intelligence and really building strong leadership.
You know,
personal development for professional success. I mean, we're using this we're using the word leader, but this is great for anyone.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it impacts relationships, impacts everything. And so as we go through, you know, we talked about problem solving. Joe, say a little bit about reality testing. What's reality testing?
Well, reality testing is just as important. Now, let me just see where that floats in here. Give me 1 second, because I was looking for a completely different slide for you. So I need
about that. Well, I can talk about it.
That's okay. Reality testing is the ability to objectively, and I am waving my Italian hands in the air right now. You can't see me, but you know how animated I am, Dale. Objectively look at and validate one's feelings, right? And thinking about it with an external reality and an internal reality.
Right.
Right? Because it's not just, you need to validate yourself and of your feelings, along with thinking about what the external reality is. And you see a lot of that with, you know, the messages that we give ourselves, right? I think you hit on that earlier. Well, we spend a lot of time beating ourselves up all day long. And, you know, this is where in coaching, when we build a relationship with a client and we're able to create a safe space for them to share in, I'm sure you've seen the same thing, that we all, across the board, we all have a lot of the same challenges. It's sort of like just the names change, but the challenges are all the same. We all have unless you're a raging narcissist with personality disorders, right? We all have self-doubt. Right. All have worry. We all question ourselves.
And when done well, that's great. Like if you're about to speak and you want you've got to be nervous. I get nervous when I'm not nervous when I'm speaking. That means I'm not, I haven't put it all in. I want, I want to do that. And so that can be very healthy, but it can be very unhealthy too if you overdo that.
I love when you give me a great segue into a coaching tool. And you just gave me a great segue. May I share it?
Please.
Okay, so when I work with individuals that get stressed, I don't want to say they have a fear of public speaking, because it's not a fear. They're just stressed that they have to present. Maybe they're presenting to a board of directors, maybe presenting in a regulatory environment, whatever it may be. What you work over a period of time, because change isn't instant, right? You're developing that new neural pathway. So my tool for them is, as soon as they're done, they have to think about and write down for 10 minutes all the things that went well. Every single thing that went well.
I like that. Yeah.
And then they can think about what went wrong.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. I often, we're speaking about public speaking. The research shows that public speaking is the #1 fear for people, and dying is the #2 fear. So, the old joke of a guy speaking at the funeral would rather be in the coffin than speaking.
I did not know that, Dale. That's really interesting. I did not know that. #1 fear
is public speaking. Yeah. It's been verified. So it's the other thing as we go through this, as we get close, because this is really important, and I'm hoping people feel confident. Now, people don't always ask a lot of questions, but please ask some questions if we're not covering a subject that you want. But the other thing is impulse control. We're in a society now, which is impulse control seems to, I don't know if you see this, Joe. I think it's gone out, has really gone down, the impulse control from violence to people swearing to road rage to, that the stresses of society have become so high that the emotional quotient has gone down as a society. Because this impulse control it's unbelievable how people can't control their impulses.
And it's interesting, and this is not based in any scientific study, but maybe based as a parent, right? And as an aunt to nephews and nieces, that this next generation, they impulsively text, say things, send pictures to each other, right? But 90% of the things that they will text when they are not having impulse control, they would never say to someone's face.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
They would never say it to someone's face. And I remember a friend of mine, she saw something that her child had posted on Facebook. And she printed it out and she said, I want you to say this to my face. I want you to read what you printed. This was 20 years ago.
Wow.
Read it to my face. And my niece started crying because she couldn't read it to her mother. Well, then you shouldn't be posting it anywhere, right? Not to get the parenting on, but think about that, right? It's just a different generation. And maybe that contributes to this, Dale.
I think it does. I think it absolutely does. And
the filter, the decorum,
and then finally, in a few minutes, you talked before about stress management, but some of the keys there are, the flexibility that we sometimes are so rigid that adds to the stress. I often hate, you've been to those presentations where the speaker has 40 PowerPoints and people are distracted, they're not connecting, but he has to get through all 40 PowerPoints because he's inflexible.
Yeah.
That annoys the heck out of me. But some people do that instead of adjusting the conversation based on that. And so that lack of flexibility adds the stress. One of the other things is someone who's become a friend, Billie Jean King, and because I'm big in involved in tennis, wrote a book called Pressure is a Privilege. And that if you have pressure, that means you're at a stage, you've earned something to get to that higher stage. And so the stress tolerance reminds me of that if you look at stress, now again, there's personal stress, but if you have stress in the business world, it means you have a position of significance. And so in some ways, it's a privilege to have that stress, and then you can learn to really manage it. And then optimism is, I mean, life. I always tell myself, and I mentioned before you got on, that I've gone through, I had a major health crisis.
Yes.
Over 3 weeks and almost died, and in one instance, and you can look at that and say, God, why are you doing this to me? Or you can look at that and say, thank God that I'm alive. I could be dead. And my view is my worst day is better than 90% of the people in the world's best day.
Absolutely.
So I have no right to really be down and depressed, and because I'm privileged. I have privilege, and I'm honest. I'm open to admit I'm privileged, and that optimism really helps manage stress.
And I will say that while we're in this last area, this last component, and you spoke about flexibility, I feel that flexibility is such an important skill in our both leadership and in our daily lives, because
yes, absolutely.
And it really can lower or increase your stress tolerance, right?
Well, Joe, look at what happened. I mean, there's actually Sue and I got when I disappeared, I got my other computer, and I was going online to figure out what the problem is, why you can't turn your, and we'll fix it for next week. But we could have just, you and I could have just said, well, there's no camera, and just been so stressed that it's not perfect, and we could have ruined the entire conversation. Instead, we just kind of went with the flow, and I hope the audience enjoyed the conversation. But
absolutely,
that was a perfect.
I was pleasantly surprised. I was getting ready to mail you my slides, but I'm glad you were able to see my slides.
Yep. Well, yeah, and
that's okay, Dale.
Well, this is great. Unfortunately, we're at the end of time. It's 1:00. We'd like to let people go, but Joe, as always, we're going to have a topic, at least one topic a month going forward. But I hope people understand how important this is to every aspect of your personal and professional life. And so, Joe, you want to share your contact information in case somebody wants to get in touch with you?
You know what? I have a message. So I have a message from Susan that only we can see the chat, that our guests.
No, I copied it. I sent it to everyone. So,
okay.
I can send it to, I sent what Sue did to everyone.
You can always get me, through FDU, but let me pull up a quick,
So yeah, Sue, I copied what you did, and I sent it to everyone.
So I'm going to put it in the chat, Dale, and then you can.
Yeah, I can send it off to everyone.
But what I will say, just to kind of close, is if anyone is interested personally or professionally in taking an EQI assessment, please reach out to us. This is something that we're going to be integrating into our coach leadership training at FDU. But this is something that everyone has access to. So you can reach out to Susan, Dale, or myself, and we can show you a little bit more about how this works, right? And where you are on your subscales. It's just a great start for personal development.
Yeah, no, it really is.
And it's like a 7-minute, bullets that you just check. So it's quick and easy and painless and absolutely confidential, always to the recipient. That's another thing, just to mention, when Dale and I use any type of assessments in our work with leaders and organizations, the fiduciary and the confidentiality is always to the person being assessed. So if you were to bring something like this into your organization, each team member or each leader would get their own personal report and debrief, and that would be confidential directly to them. That information would not go to the sponsor or the organization.
Perfect. Well, I sent it to everyone, so please check that out. I want to thank you all, and we'll see you at our next session. Joe, thank you so much. Great stuff. Sue
Yeah.
and Laura, the Rothman team, thank you both.
Susan and more awesome work. Glad you're back from Abu Dhabi. We loved saying you were in Abu Dhabi all week while you were gone.
It was a great experience. And in there, emotional intelligence is one of the foundations of some of the things that they're doing. So this is global. This is not just local.
Yep.
Take care.